Alright, today we're taking a look at the Majohn No. 1 Glass Dip Pen Nib. This is something that I found online for very little money. I think I paid less than $5 for this. Let's take a quick look. Okay, just over $4 for it. And it arrived, and I realized I didn't have a appropriate holder for it, so I looked around to see what I had on hand. Nothing. So I went out to the wood shop, grabbed a piece of maple, and began turning it down. I was looking for something a bit more distinct in the way of a shape, so I wound up with my square, that is my square cross section, which has severely rounded corners. Eventually I might turn it down a bit more, I don't know. Today we're going to be using this Jinhao Red Ink. We'll see how this goes. This ink was one that came off of maybe a Temu or AliExpress sale earlier this summer. It's September 16th as I record this. You probably won't see this for months. But there was an AliExpress sale on fountain pen ink. So, this is not my first dip pen. I have fairly regularly used a Sailor Hakoro dip pen with a fewed nib. That one I believe was my first fewed nibbed writing implement and taught me to appreciate the fewed to the point where I've actually modified a couple of nibs into fewed nibs just for the sheer joy of writing with it. This is a very different experience, this glass nib. It has a bit of a needle tip, which means that writing with it is very different from the steel nib on the Sailor Hakoro. Loading the ink into this nib is also very different. You can see the entire glass nib gets saturated with the ink, as opposed to having a feed that works with the nib to transfer the ink onto the page. This is the first time I'm using a glass nib as well, and it takes some getting used to. So going into this, I didn't know how to write with a nib like this. I didn't know how to manage the load of ink on a nib like this, and we're going to see that in this video. There's a bit of a learning curve for me. I'm sure this is something that most reasonable people can adapt to quickly, but whether or not you derive any joy in using something like this is a whole other question. I was hoping that having something like this on hand with a bunch of ink, I would be able to use it for sampling. I could learn to use a glass nib like this in a manner similar to how I'm using my Sailor Hakoro, but the moment I looked at this nib, I knew that wasn't going to work. I know there are stubbed nibs that are made of glass. I know there are fewed nibs made from glass, but I didn't have that. I went with this one because it was on sale. And being the first glass nib I was buying, I wasn't willing to invest any real money into it. So this is what I have. We will continue using it and make future decisions based on that. So what I'm highlighting on my page now is the difference in the shading of the ink as written. You can see Pizza Party, I had just loaded the pen, versus Fox Jump, so you can see how much lighter that is. This is usership issues. I need to learn to manage the load of ink on a glass nib more effectively. I will say that the turning of this barrel, this maple barrel, as a nib holder was a lot of fun. I make little videos about my nonsense journey with writing implements, but the reality is that in my spare time I spend far more of it in my woodshop. And this holder is one that I literally slapped together in a matter of minutes. So it is not refined. My goal was to get something workable. I have held many nib holders made from wood that were more cylindrically shaped, and I didn't like that. Paintbrushes, I didn't like the look of a lot of the nib holders out there. So this is one that over the course of time I will refine further on a lathe. And I fortunately spare you all from my bad handwriting by writing out of frame. I think the best thing about this nib is how it looks when it has ink on it. Look at the red on the veins and how that loads onto that nib. It looks beautiful, but it's effectively a fine point, and as we all know, every nib should be a steel nib unless it's an architect nib or a long knife nib or something equally fun. And here you can see the amount of effort it takes, freshly inked, to shade in a little area with this particular nib. So maybe I'll supplement this with a brush nib if I find one that, if I remember to find one, frankly. Or maybe I will learn to use this one more effectively, or just go with a, you can see here I'm having some issues scratching there, just go with a supplemental glass nib that is a stub. And I don't know, is this worth $4? Yes. I think that this is far easier to clean up than a regular fountain pen that I dip in ink to sample it. I think that having an option from the Sailor Hakoro pens are having multiple options. Those options are a good thing, and we'll see how this unfolds in my usership through the future.